Hello and welcome everyone. I know we've still got a few people joining, but we're going to get started. My name is Michael Nieto. I'm one of the program administrators here at UCDC, and I'm joined by my colleague Shea Bartlett, who is our coordinator of promotions and communications. And we are going to be doing a short hour-long presentation today about working remotely, Zoom etiquette, and digital literacy. So we hope you find today's session useful. It will be posted on YouTube later for you to rewatch if you choose to. And now Shea is going to get us started.
Hi everyone, welcome. I'm really excited to be talking to you about digital literacy and working remotely. First off, while I talk, we're going to bring up a poll to ask about what digital platforms you might be familiar with. So while you all are answering that, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. As Mike mentioned, I'm the coordinator of promotions and communications here at UCDC. I have a deep history. For the past 5 years, I've been working with various organizations on digital marketing and strategies, including other universities as well as theaters in the DC area. I'm a graduate of the University of Kentucky, where I hold degrees in political science and public administration. So starting off, why does digital literacy matter? Right now, we're all in a remote environment, and with the state of things are going, it's not going to change anytime soon, which means we're all going to be thrust in learning different aspects of how to work remotely and digitally, and the best way to communicate with each other through that. But even when life gets back to normal and we're all working with one another in the same office space, a lot of these digital platforms will still exist. You'll still be probably likely chatting through Slack, you'll be sending emails, and you will also likely be having an online storage system for your content and data. So, all right, let's looking at this polls. What digital platform do you have experience with? The vast majority of people have all used, 90% have used Google Drive. SharePoint's pretty popular, so is Google Hangout. Blue Jeans, not so much, and Slack. All right, so I guess for the thing to start with, what are these platforms? They're various and a little bit different, and they have different goals. For example, you're probably going to see a lot of Microsoft programs on Google. So with Microsoft, that's SharePoint, Teams, and I'm sure we all know Word, PowerPoint, all that jazz. Outlook. For Google, you have Gmail, Docs, Sheets, Hangout. So how does that matter? It's because a lot of times organizations are moving to put all of their content, that means memos, photographs, your logos, various internal messaging on there, which means that you'll have to learn to figure out how to store, it's a storage system. There's also different ways of communications. A lot of us are all familiar with email, but more and more organizations are starting to do chat platforms. A lot of us millennials grew up with AIM. I know more and more people are using things like Discord for fandom purposes, but also video games. And some of that's even been moving towards the professional realm. In previous workspaces, I've been working with Slack and this current one, we use Microsoft Teams a lot. And those are a brilliant way to have more one-on-one communications. And that's what differentiates it from email. Email tends to be slower. Slack and Microsoft Teams have a growing expectation of more instantaneous communication, usually within the bounds of your workspace. And they can be broken off into various sections. One thing you'll see is when you start officially in the fall, we will actually have a UCDC Slack to serve as a community space for all of us to talk about, various topics, be it podcasts, music, movies, the election coming up, as well as a space to more directly ask questions about internships or academics. And all of that can seem a little daunting because there's so much about it, which is why I'm going to talk a little bit about the best practices for using the digital platforms. And let me share my screen. All right, best practices. I'm going to start off at saying that a lot of this has to do with paying attention to your surroundings and the people around you. So one of the best things to know is pay attention to naming conventions for documents, for your emails, and what have you when you're communicating and creating digital content. I know a lot of times I remember in classes when I'd be working on an essay before I'd send it into professors, I would name it like, you know, keyboard or whatever came up with. You can't exactly do that in the workplace, however. So pay attention to how they are naming things and how they appear in the files. It could be anything from starting off with the organization, so like UCDC, academics, and then the topic. So, and that's something you can learn pretty quickly on your first week. A lot of times with your internship, those first few weeks are, the expectation is, you know, you listen and you learn. It can be a little bit overwhelming. And I know after first week at any job, I'm a little bit exhausted. And it will be a lot of information, but it will help you in the long run. And it will help get you in the practice of doing that for your future career. For chat-like platforms, pay attention to voice and language. Oftentimes it's very easy just to slide in and respond to something with lol or emojis, and that might actually be okay with chat programs. At a previous workplace on the Slack, we often responded to each other with silly GIFs, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that until I learned about the workspace a little more. So like pay attention to how people are talking about each other and how talking to each other and go from there. Don't initially start off as being super familiar because you don't always know these people and they don't know you. But the better you get to know each other and closer, you might be able to, you know, be a little bit more relaxed and professional. Email tends to mostly be a little bit more professional than chat. Watch out and see what they're using for email signatures. Those are very important, especially when you're talking internally and externally, because if you're new, people won't know who you are. And outside of Zoom meetings or various chats, they're not going to see your face and see you in the hallways day to day, which is how normally people would talk. So if you're sending emails, make sure to include your signature saying you're Jane Doe, who you're an intern, this is how to contact you, and you're from University of California, Berkeley, Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, UCLA. It's cool to rep your school. And then a lot of times you'll be asked to include a picture. This will be like pretty much a profile picture like you'll see on Facebook, and Instagram and LinkedIn. And my advice is when you're doing these things to have a bit of a professional profile picture. Now, professional does not mean have a suit and tie. You don't need any of that. You don't need to hire anyone fancy. Professionals can just be pictures taken with your cell phone. And, you know, just as who you are and representing who you are. So here are a few examples of what I would say are fun, cool, and okay profile pictures. My advice, don't look, all of these people are, you know, professionally looking. They're not dressed in, they don't have to be dressed in a suit or tie. Many of these pictures are taken with your cell phone. And Mike's at the bottom left was even shot by a friend. And the one on me on the bottom right was also shot by a friend. So you don't need that professional aspect. What you need to do is make sure you don't look like you woke up first thing in the morning. You don't have to have a very busy background. You know, it could be a wall. You can throw up portrait mode in front of some trees. It can even be a blank background. Smile for the camera if you feel comfortable doing that. Make sure there's not a lot of dead space around you. You're supposed to be the one who's focused in the front and center. What not to do? As much as we love our pets, mine is sleeping to the side right now, hanging out in all my Zoom meetings. You don't really like them in your professional photos. Don't include that on LinkedIn. Middle picture is me in a flower crown. It's my Instagram profile. Not the best for a workplace, however. Flower crowns, unfortunately, are not work appropriate, much as I wish they would be. And then the final photo, don't include pictures with people who are clearly cropped out. We can all see it. And your prom photo, as nice as and wonderful I'm sure you all looked, you all were rocking it in your proms or whatever fancy event, they're not always the most professional look. Everyone knows it's your prom photo. So that is my intro to digital literacy and the do's and don'ts of that. Now I'm going to pass it over to Mike to talk about the best and proper Zoom etiquette.
All right. So as I said, my name is Mike and I'm one of the program administrators. The reason I'm kind of leading this charge is that prior to working at UCDC, I spent 8 years working in a fully remote job where I was the only employee sitting in my home office, often my bedroom, all alone, traveling the world, doing international education work, but I was always alone and I was always remote. So essentially what I'm about to present to you all is information that I have gathered through my knowledge of doing it. It's also stuff that I've made a lot of friends over the years who also work remote and their advice and their tips and tools. So I've put it all together for you in this segment of our presentation. So one of the first things that you are going to be aware of when you start working in your internship remotely is that I'm going to share a screen just to get some quick notes up for you. 1 second. First impressions are important. And so you're going to want to learn how to make the right first impression. When you first start your internship, your very first day for most of you, it's going to be you on a screen just like this, meeting your boss, meeting your supervisors, meeting your coworkers for the first time. And one of the first things that people are going to ask you is, tell us about yourself. And so what you want to do is have an elevator pitch, have a short 1 to 2 minute summary of yourself that you know. And this is your best first impression. You're going to be able to say, my name is Mike, here's my background, here's what I do, here's what I want to accomplish with my career, with my education, and be able to sell yourself to your coworkers. And that's going to be the best first impression you can give, is knowing who you are. You want to look like you're dressed for the job. I always recommend your first week of work overdress. So if you're not sure what you should be wearing, sure, put on a collared shirt, put on a nice blouse, put on a nice top, put on a jacket, whatever you feel comfortable in, but don't be wearing a t-shirt. And then throughout the first week, look at how other people are dressing for the work. If everyone else is in polos, then you can start wearing a polo. And so learn from observing your coworkers. You want to make sure that as you go into meetings that you are always on time, especially at the beginning. You never want to be the last person to log on, especially when you're first starting. I always recommend log on early. Be that awkward guy or girl who is already sitting there by yourself with the video off when other people start to log in, because that shows you have time management and that shows you're aware of the importance of the meetings. Make sure that you understand the goals that are set for your internship and for the organization and how your internship will impact that. And that's one of the biggest things I think that's important with an internship, is knowing what you're going to be doing, working on, and how it impacts the overall organization. This is also a great way for you to start speaking with your supervisors. So as you're learning about the internship position, as you're talking about what you're going to be doing, ask the question, how is this work relevant to what the bigger picture is? And that way you understand the importance of what you're doing, but it helps you to share your information and share what you're working on in a way that you know it's impacting the bigger picture. And then one last thing is just make sure you come into every meeting prepared. The worst thing to do is just show up and not know what you're talking about, to not know what the subject is. If there were notes sent out before the meeting or anything like that, for you to be sitting there kind of like, I don't know what's the topic, what are we doing? You want to make sure you are prepared for every meeting, that you've done your research, that you've done any work that needs to be done, and that you have it in front of you so that you can share the knowledge that you have. And those are just some ideas for first impressions. That's going to set the tone for the rest of your internship. People will learn really quickly who you are, and they will start reaching out to you if you show them that you're on top of your game. Now, being effective as an intern that is remote is also a challenge. So you set your first impression, everyone knows who you are, and then how do you continue working with them? And so a few things to talk about is being effective. Communication is the key. If you don't share things with people, if you don't ask questions, if you don't communicate, you won't be effective as an intern. You want to make sure that you set up regular meetings or chats with your supervisors, whether it be 1 or 2 or 3 people. Make sure you are checking in with them weekly, if not multiple times a week, to make sure you fully understand where things are going, what you're working on. Establish those meetings. Say, hey, if it's easier, I'd love to rather do impromptu, or if you'd rather, we can do every Monday at 2 p.m. and schedule something and put it on your calendar. And again, always show up on time. And that's how you really show your effectiveness as an intern. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That is the key point. You are an intern. Everyone knows that you are coming into this position not having full knowledge of what you're doing in your job, or that you're just trying to learn. So when you ask questions, people realize that you are a person who is seeking information, and that will help you along as well. Do not pretend that you know something and then do something wrong. It's better to ask a question. It is also a great way for you to communicate with your fellow coworkers outside of big, large group meetings. If your regular weekly meeting is 20 people and you're working on a project with Susan, and you reach out to Susan and say, hey, do you have a moment for a quick phone call? I have a question for you. That's going to help you build your relationship with that one coworker or other coworkers throughout the duration of your internship. Be prepared to work at different times. Most of you are going to be working remotely from the West Coast, and most of the organizations you're working for are here on the East Coast. Occasionally, there will be meetings that you need to be on that happen early in the morning on the West Coast. Not every organization can schedule everything to happen after 11 a.m. when you're on the East Coast, when you're not even up. And so be prepared for that. Talk to your supervisor. If you have issues, if you have problems with early meetings, make sure you arrange that with your supervisor. If you're going to miss a meeting because of something, other conflict, make sure you get the information that would need to be presented to that meeting to your supervisor prior to missing it. And that is going to be super helpful and also show that level of enthusiasm and dedication to your internship. Also, don't bite off more than you can chew. It is very easy as an intern when you're getting started to be the yes person, to say, yes, I'll work on that project. Yes, I'll get involved in that. I'm happy to do the research for you. And all of a sudden your plate is full. You've got class that you've got to go to, and now you have all this extra work. Because your desire to be a part of the organization. So at the beginning, take your time, don't overcommit yourself, don't jump onto projects if you're not sure if you have the workload availability to do them. And that will be something you learn throughout the duration of your internship. Time management will be your best friend as you go through this. And then as you get comfortable with your rhythm and your projects, that's when you can start taking on more and more and more and more work. Until you know where you're at. Patience is a must. In the remote environment, for most of the organizations you are working with, this is the first time they've ever hired a remote intern. This might be the first time they've had a remote employee, but everyone went remote, so people are still trying to figure things out. Here at UCDC, we just got our webinar account finally set up. So in the future, we have a webinar that we can do rather than a Zoom meeting with 30 boxes in the screen. It's taking time for organizations to get prepared, to get everything set up. So you need to have patience with your supervisors and with your colleagues, because for many of them, they're trying to figure out how to work remotely at the same time that you are, and no one is an expert. I've done it for 8 years. I still do not consider myself an expert, because every time I do it, I learn something new. Take advantage of the remote opportunity. Here's one thing for you to be knowledgeable. A lot of the times when you start an internship, a lot of the stuff they give you to do is grunt work. It's photocopies, it's coffee, it's very basic office administrative level stuff. Because of the remote environment, you're not gonna have to do that. A lot of the stuff you're gonna get from the get-go are gonna be big projects, detailed projects, research projects, writing stuff that's gonna get published. It's gonna be a more useful project-based organization from the get-go. So be ready for that, and take advantage of it, because you're gonna be learning a lot from this remote internship. I've heard from a few interns who did summer internships and other internships through other programs who have said that they think that the internship as a remote intern might have actually been better than the in-person experience could have been. So really make sure you're taking advantage of every moment that you're working. And then lastly is to make sure you're in a space where you can focus. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later. But if you live in a group house or you live in a home with your whole family, make sure that you have a space that you can work without being distracted too much. Everyone is dealing with this at the same time. People are home, they're homeschooling their children at the same time. There will be distractions, but you don't want to be sitting, say you live in a house, in a sorority or fraternity house. You don't want to be sitting at the dining table with 20 people in the background screaming and yelling and having a good time while you're trying to work. It's distracting to you, and it will be distracting to anyone that you do have to have a video call with. So try to find at least a corner, a closet, somewhere where you can go, where you can have some peace periodically to make phone calls or Zoom calls, or to really focus on your work. The other thing that's important with the remote experience is networking with your colleagues. And I mentioned earlier you want to ask questions, and that's a great way to communicate with them. But one of the benefits of an internship experience in DC normally is that you're meeting all these people face to face. You can get cocktails, you can go to dinner, you can go to lunch. That element of the internship is not there as much right now. But so you need to be proactive to create that element. It's very simple. When, like I said, ask questions, ask for quick 5-10 minute phone calls with your coworkers. Don't be afraid to reach out to someone. If you know that someone that you work with is very successful in their career and has done things that you are interested in, make sure that you reach out to them and just say, hey, I was curious if you would have 20 or 30 minutes for a virtual coffee date. And you literally do a virtual coffee date, and you drink your coffee and you ask them questions about their career, you share your goals, and you have a conversation. It is a great way to get to know your colleagues, to get to connect with them, and to further network with them. 2 weeks ago, we did a presentation on LinkedIn. Again, make sure that you are using your LinkedIn, and before you meet with someone, look them up and see what they've done in their career and see what they've worked on, and have the knowledge about your coworkers going into meetings with them. Also, check your company's website. A lot of the times your organization's website has bios on the employees on it. So as you're going to a meeting with people, look and see if you can find a bio, and that way you A, know what people look like before a meeting, or B, you know what their background is, so that you can make references to it. And again, it's a great way to connect with people, to network with them, but it also is showing a dedication level and a detail-oriented level for you that is really impactful to employers. If you've never met someone before, but you can walk into the meeting and say, oh, Joe, I was reading you did work with the NAACP previously. That's gonna be impactful, and it's gonna show them that you know what you're doing. So now what I wanna talk about a little bit is your workspace and how to masterly work from home, but also to do Zoom properly. So we're gonna pop up a poll. My colleague Yenna is gonna show it. And I wanna just get a sense of where you all are planning to be working from. Most of you, I suspect, will choose your bedroom, but I'm curious to see what other places are there. As you were going into Zoom calls and Zoom meetings, One of the things that is going to be important is not just your space and what's behind you, but also your setup. So make sure that you always are testing your video and audio before a call. There is nothing worse than being that person who cannot unmute or can't hear something and having to log off and then log back in. That is embarrassing to all of us. We've all done it. But make sure you test things before the call, and that if by joining early, that's a great way for you to do that. Verify your settings, your name. If your name shows up as something, so you'll see on mine, it says UCDC Mike Nieto with my pronouns. If yours shows up as some nickname, like your AIM screen name or your email address, make sure the first thing you do when you log on is you click on those 3 little dots in the top corner of your image and you change your name to your first name or last name or whatever your company's protocol is for that. Because you don't want to be sitting there with some MDN 2000, which was my original AOL email address. You don't want that to be what's visible. You want people to know who you are. Make sure, like I said, you're in a quiet, non-distracting location. That's hard for a lot of people, so don't be too scared of it. If you do have background noise, then make sure that you're muting yourself when you're not talking. And that way that background noise doesn't seep into the regular call and distract other people. It is general protocol to always mute yourself when you're not speaking. You'll learn how to do that. For some of you, there are quick ways like pressing your space bar to unmute when you need to speak. Other times you can just click, but learn how to mute and unmute yourself regardless of whether you're using Zoom or Google Hangouts or WebEx or whatever video software is being used at your organization. Make sure you learn the basics of muting, unmuting, and turning on or off your video. Turning on or off your video is also very important if you need to do something, if you need to get up, if you need to move around. You want to make sure you turn off your video so people don't get to see where you're going, or if you decide to go to the bathroom. There's a great YouTube video of a woman who did that in a group call, and it's hilarious and embarrassing because she forgot her video was on. So make sure you're taking careful control of your screen and what's being shared with other people. The other thing is to make sure your background is appropriate. I mentioned people running around. If you are working from home and your bed is behind you like mine is, make sure you make your bed in the morning before you jump on the call. If you're doing laundry, make sure the laundry isn't piled up behind you. I'm not sure which side that's on because mine's opposite. But make sure that the background is clear of distractions is the thing to do. We are going to provide all of you with virtual backgrounds. So you will be able to, and I will show you an example, you will be able to log on to all of your calls with a really cool virtual background that says UCDC intern. And it will likely be something with DC in the background. And that is one way, if you are in a space that does have a distracting background or you can't get somewhere that's just a plain wall or something, this is one way to show your face without everything behind you. Another option is to put something on the wall behind you. Now I'm gonna go back to this screen share and show you some examples. One of the things that I really like is a website, it's on Twitter actually, and it is called Room Rater. And it's just a fun Twitter handle to follow. And they go through posts and show people's rooms and they rank them and they score them. So if you're trying to figure out what works for you to be working in front of on Zoom calls, go through the website and or the Twitter handle and look at all the different backgrounds that people have. They've been doing a great job during the Democratic convention of rating all the different Zoom backgrounds that are showing up on the convention. And they do it every day. It's just a fun way to kind of get advice and see things to work on. But the important thing is, so for example, with this guy, he's got a bunch of pictures and books. They're all organized and they're not distracting. Another example, this is a actual Broadway star. Her name is Elizabeth Stanley. I like Broadway, so I brought her on. She works and lives in a one-bedroom studio with her husband and a kid. And so she was doing a bunch of Broadway performances and live songs, and she couldn't find a space that was clear of distractions. So she literally hung a blanket up behind her, and that is her background. That is perfectly acceptable. If you need to go into your closet to do something, you can hang a towel, hang a blanket, something up behind you so the clothes aren't visible. The other important thing is lighting. So going back to this guy, his face is really dark and that affects the image quality. So make sure that you have some sort of desk lamp or something if you are in a dark space that doesn't have natural light. One other thing that I recommend is, for me personally, I have a window near in my bedroom where I work, which does good for light, but when it's not on or when it's not bright out, it's really dark. I have an overhead light that when it's on, my whole screen changes, my image changes, it looks washed out. It's just not a great way for me to be on a group call. It looks bad, I look bad, and I like to look nice once in a while. So if you aim the light so that you don't have it shining directly on you or into your camera, you'll get better lighting on your face for your calls. It's just a little trick to improve that. Now, as far as your appearance goes, today I'm wearing my UCDC polo. You could be wearing a collared shirt, you could be wearing a suit and tie. It's up to you and what your other coworkers are dressing like. Like I said, observe people and see what they're wearing, and that'll be a great thing for you. The important thing is that you are aware of where your camera is. One of the more funny things that have happened in this Zoom world on Good Morning America, and I'm going to ask you guys to comment in the chats. On Good Morning America, an anchor was on, and I want to know who can see what's wrong with the image. And you're looking at the gentleman on the right. And so throw it into the chat and let me know when you see it. Yes, he is not wearing pants. He did not fully understand where the bottom of his camera was. It was hilarious. It was embarrassing. He's actually gone on several shows since that to talk about it and how embarrassed he was. But so make sure that, like I said, you know what's on your screen and what is on camera. If you are planning to stand up or to move around while you're on the call, you want to make sure that you do have pants on and aren't wearing your boxer briefs like this gentleman was. And then one last thing to share with you all, Dolly Parton. I love Dolly. That's why she's in this PowerPoint. Dolly is the queen of everything. She's the queen of nice. She's the best person in the world. I love her. Everyone loves her, but don't be Dolly. Never take a video conference from your bed in your pajamas. That does not say professional. That does not say I'm dedicated to my job. If you are going to be sitting on a couch or something, make sure you're at least dressed appropriately, but you should not be taking conference calls from your bed. That's my last thing on that. I want to invite people, if you have questions about this, start sharing them in the chat. I'm about to wrap up and then we're going to start taking questions from you all about this. So feel free to throw them in the chat. But the last thing I want to talk about with working from home, and it's one of the more important things, is taking care of yourself. Many of you are going to be working your internship 30 hours a week. You're going to be taking a seminar, maybe an elective, maybe working a part-time job, maybe doing some other things online. And it's really easy for you to spend all day locked up in your bedroom or in your space that you've created to work in and never getting up, never moving around, never getting any fresh air. So it's really important throughout the duration of your internship that you are taking care of yourself. Treat each day like you are going to work. Get up in the morning, take a shower, brush your teeth, clean yourself up, have a breakfast and a coffee or whatever it is you do in the morning. Then sit down and go to work. Even if you're not leaving your house, go through the motions like you are. Take breaks. Take a 15-minute break here. After you've done 2 back-to-back Zoom calls, get up from your office chair, walk around, move your body, do something so that you're not just sitting in front of the screen all day long. It will be very hard for you if that's what you do. Communicate with your colleagues. communicate with friends, schedule time to do something that's not about work or school, to make sure that you are thinking about yourself and that you're going through emotions and you're feeling them and not just always working. Occasionally, sometimes a phone call is just as good as a video meeting. Meetings on video are great. You get the personal connection, you get to see a person, you get to learn their facial reactions and learn their sarcasm. It's a much better way to communicate than email, but sometimes you don't need to be on video. Sitting and staring at a screen can be exhausting. So occasionally, if it's something that makes sense, jump on a phone call, and that way you can pace around your space while you're on that call and discussing something. So you're moving around, so you're not just staring at the screen. And then make sure that you do incorporate some sort of exercise into your routine. Whether it's just walking around the block, going on a run, if the gym is open and you are comfortable going to a gym, go into the gym, work the stress out, but make sure you're taking care of yourself. And that's the most important thing. It's very easy in the remote world to stay in your pajamas and sweatpants all day, to forget to brush your teeth, to forget to shower. You put on all this weight, you grow out your beard, you end up looking like me. Don't do that. Take care of yourselves, and it will be a great experience for you. So that being said, we want to open this up. Are there questions? Anything that we've talked about and then some, feel free to pop in the chat.
Mike, I wanted to share the results of poll 2.
Okay. So most of you are working from your bedrooms, which is great. Like I said, make sure your bed is made. That looks terrible. Sharon, one of our campus coordinators from Irvine, has a question. A lot of us do not have our videos turned on right now. And I've noticed in meetings with students that the majority do not have their videos on. What's your opinion on what students should do regarding this in meetings, group or individual, in their internships? My advice is similar to what you wear while you're working. Observe what happens to other people. Go in, have your video on. See what other people are doing. I know some organizations, people only turn their videos on when they speak. Other people have it on the whole time. It depends on the comfort level, the size of the call, what's going on. But always default to it on, and then if no one else has it on, you're welcome to turn yours off. But I would always recommend to default with it on.
Yeah, and I would like to also say that this is a great opportunity to also communicate with your supervisor. I know this is something it sounds like we're saying over and over and again, communicate, communicate, communicate. But in a remote and digital environment, being able to communicate with one another is paramount. And it's really how you will succeed. Sometimes, like even myself personally, I've set up one-on-one meetings with staff and coworkers, and I'm like, hey guys, it's been a day and I have a lot of Zoom fatigue. Are you okay if we just do this over the phone or without video? And a lot of times people are understanding about that as well.
Any more questions? Feel free to unmute and just speak up or pop it into the chat. One thing that I'll add while we're waiting for questions is, for those of you who did say you will be working from a coffee shop or a public place, I cannot stress enough the power of the mute button. No one wants to hear a bunch of Starbucks orders being shouted out in the background throughout the duration of a Zoom call. So make sure if you are in a community space like that, that you are muted unless you're speaking.
And also, I know I received an email asking about Zoom backgrounds. I will include a link to that in the chat just now, as well as sharing it in our LinkedIn and Facebook groups, and a link in our newsletter. Now, one thing to remember, it's okay if you can't do a Zoom background. Me, myself, my laptop doesn't allow it. So I have to get creative in making sure my space around me is interesting. And it sometimes means on a Zoom call, if I'm facing my bed, my cats will appear out from behind my head, which has happened more than once. And, you know, sometimes that's okay, and that happens. in a remote environment, we have to remember this is still, you know, our home and our space.
And I will stress to remember that everyone is in the same boat. There are people who are working from home, educating their kids. I have one friend who's a single mom. She has 4 kids under the age of 15, and she's trying to homeschool them while working full time. So there will be distractions, and you just roll with them. And that's what happens if, you know, if you've got a little sibling who's living at home with you and in the middle of a call, let's just say they throw a pillow at you. You can apologize to your coworkers, just be like, really sorry, blah, blah, blah. Most people, 100% fine with it. And then you can scold your sibling after the call.
Mike, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so as somebody who loves to eat and drink constantly, what are your thoughts on eating and drinking during Zoom calls?
Drinking is fine. I mean, drinking coffee or water is fine. Let me clarify that. Drinking coffee or water is fine. I always have water or coffee with me. That is completely acceptable. Eating on a call should not be done unless it has already been made clear by whoever's hosting it, like a brown bag lunch call, or they say, hey, we're gonna do a morning coffee, bring a snack, da 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 da. But the worst thing to happen is for you to be sitting here chowing down and then have to speak and have food in your mouth. So drinking is fine. Eating, I would hold off on as much as you can unless it is clear that it is a lunchtime or a snack time call and everyone else is doing it. But again, this is one of those situations where speak to your supervisor, and if you've got a busy schedule and you just don't have time to take a break between school and work to eat a full lunch, check in with your supervisor. If there's a call and you can just say, hey, is it all right if I eat lunch on the call? If they say fine, then that's fine. And that's the best way around it.
That is one of the many, many merits of sometimes not having video chats. You can get away with snacking and eating.
Mike, when you held something to your mouth, if it was food, I was just going to call you out, but it was just water. So
one thing is you can get creative with mugs, show off your personality a little bit, because even if you are a worker, you're still a person and yourself, and some of that will come through no matter what. And that's okay. And it's a really great way to connect with your coworkers. Not everything is always going to be about work 100%.
Right. And if you do choose to go the virtual background route, that is another opportunity for you to kind of express your personality. I would not recommend doing it at the very beginning, but as you get more comfortable with your coworkers and learn what the environment is like, that's when you can do it. For example, on what would have been opening day, everyone at UCDC got to see me with my background as an empty baseball ballpark, because I like baseball and I was very sad there was no baseball. So you can share your personality in other ways while you're on calls, once you kind of get into it and understand your colleagues and know who people are and what is appropriate. That being said, if there are no more questions, we will end this a little bit early. Young Chan just shared something about the elevator pitch. Reach out to your program administrator. That's correct. If you want to talk about it, if you want to get feedback, we're here for you. That also reminds me, if you are still looking for an internship, make sure you're working with myself if you're one of my students, Chantal, my colleague, or my other colleague, Alfreda. And the 3 of us will help you get your internship figured out sooner rather than later.
And be sure to drop in on our Facebook group and LinkedIn groups. I've been sharing those in various emails. So we can't wait to have you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all in coming weeks.